Thank you for listening to Barrier Breakers, Building Communities and Connecting the Dots, hosted by Jeremy Flowers and Nell Spencer.
My name is Jeremy Flowers. I'm the Director of Marketing and Public Relations for the East Texas Crisis Center.
And I'm Nell Spencer, the Director of Outreach and Education at the Women's Center of East Texas.
Nell and I got together last year sometime and decided that we really wanted to engage or take this journey or endeavor to raise awareness because we believe that it's important across the East Texas area that, we normalize the conversation surrounding both domestic violence, sexual assault, and other forms of violence.
Yeah, because both the East Texas Crisis Center and the Women's Center serve survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and sex trafficking.
Do you want to expound a little bit more on, in particular, what services the Women's Center provide, and the Crisis Center probably provides some of the exact ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Women's Center serves 6 counties: Gregg, Upshur, Marion, Panola, Rusk, and Harrison. We have 2 outreach offices, one in Marshall and one in Henderson. And then our main office is in Longview. We have an emergency shelter for women and children who are fleeing domestic violence or sexual assault situations. Our shelter can hold about 30 women and children. And then if a male survivor comes in who needs shelter, we'll just house them elsewhere. We provide, all of our services are free for our survivors. And so counseling, accompaniment to a hospital, to law enforcement, to the DA's office. We will go to court with somebody when they're, or if their case ever does go to trial. Advocacy, housing assistance. We have 4 Hopes closets that our survivors get to shop for free. So that's our thrift store. And we do kind of a host of other things: support groups, educational groups, parenting groups. And then we have something called advanced class, and that is specifically for moms who have open CPS cases. And it's an 8-week class to educate moms on domestic violence, parenting children through that type of situation, all with the goal of self-sufficiency for the survivor and breaking generational cycles or domestic violence cycles. So yeah, how about the East Texas Crisis Center?
A lot of similar services provided. We cover 5 county service area: Smith County, Henderson, Wood, Rains, and Van Zant. We also have an emergency shelter that houses up to 60 women and children at a time. That includes a children's program. As you're aware, the children growing up in an abusive situation often don't have the opportunity to be kids. So our children's facilitators really put an emphasis on creating an environment for kids just to be kids. We also have a commercial kitchen where our kitchen staff provides lunch and dinner throughout the week. And then for breakfast and over the weekends, we have a vending area that we stock. We also provide counseling and advocacy, like you mentioned, legal advocacy, hospital accompaniment. And we also have outreach offices in Athens, which is Henderson County, Canton, which is Van Zant County, and in Quitman, which is Wood County. And we also work with the offenders. We have a batterer intervention and prevention program that's a 28-week course. It's mandated or court-ordered. And the BIP facilitators really work with the offenders to create space for them to find accountability for the choices they made. So, and so I did some research before coming out here, and I found out that between the combined 11 counties that each of our agencies serve, we have a population of 782,000 folks.
Yeah, so we cover a large portion of East Texas.
Yeah, that's so many people.
So tell me a little bit about why you do this work. What about this work is important to you?
So I got into this work by what I used to call an accident. Like I didn't know what a crisis center was. Wasn't familiar with what domestic violence or intimate partner violence was. Um, and when I moved to Tyler, I needed a job, and I got a job at the East Texas Crisis Center in maintenance. And I really started to learn about domestic violence, intimate partner violence. After seeing the impact it had on the women and the children in the shelter. And it allowed me to reflect on my childhood and come to the understanding that I also grew up in an abusive home. And I would have never labeled it that, right? I didn't have the terminology for it. I knew it was dysfunctional, but that was as far as my education allowed me to define it. And so I really felt moved and motivated to want to implement change. And so I came across a website one day called Responsible Men. Shout out to Ted Rutherford. He's currently an employee at the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault. And I was like, there's nothing for men in East Texas to engage them in violence prevention. So I reached out to him, and it's like, hey, I would love to, have an outreach program of this. He's like, dude, I just want to have it. Well, I want it to have a mind of its own. So you take it and run with it. And so in 2009, I developed a program that I called Step Up, after modifying it from Responsible Men. And in 2009, I began working in primary prevention, working with men and boys to challenge masculine norms that foster supportive violence. And so I did that with the local colleges, the high schools, after school programs. Did that for 3 or 4 years. And then I moved over to full-time fundraising to where I am now, the director of marketing and public relations. But I've come to learn that, not only because I recognize that I need to change myself, that I recognize the prevalence of violence in society and in our community in particular, that there needs to be change, but also I have a son and I want to, as cliche as it sounds, break the cycle. Yeah. So that's why it's important to me.
Yeah, you made a statement about being in a home where there was violence and not really understanding what was violence. And I think that that's important to understand, is that when somebody is raised in a home where there's violence, it just becomes normalized. And that behavior, that child grows up to be an adult who maybe enters into a domestic violence relationship or becomes a perpetrator, because that to them is normal, and they don't know a different way to do it. And so part of, I think both for you and I, this podcast is to educate and shed light on what is quote unquote normal behavior, and what is healthy behavior, and what is toxic behavior, and what cycles do need to be broken. And so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, also, I would just, and normalize the conversation. It can be difficult to talk about. A lot of people don't know how to talk about it, may not feel comfortable talking about it. It can be, in a lot of instances, still a taboo subject for folks.
There's a lot of shame.
Yeah, there's a shame.
Being a survivor of violence, I chose that person. I chose to stay with that person. I chose to have children with that person. And making sure that these survivors know that asking for help, talking about it, is actually one of the most powerful things that they could do for themselves and their children. And that's not a shameful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they didn't choose it.
Yeah.
Right. The abuse is not a choice. I just want to take a moment to shout out to Allstate, Melissa Azam, right here in Kilgore, for supporting this endeavor. The podcast been a huge help. So thank you so much, Melissa, for your ongoing support and encouragement of this project. I want to send a thank you out to Real East Texas. We're sitting in Real East Texas right now.
And it's a really cool space.
It's such a cool space.
Check it out.
It's available for you to rent if you want to come have, after hours party here, events here. I mean, it's such a cool space where we are in Kilgore, though Nell's in Longview and I'm in Tyler. We met in the middle and found the perfect spot to host this podcast. So now, what's a little bit about your story? So how did you end up here in East Texas, and why has this become your passion?
Yeah. So how did I end up in East Texas? I moved to East Texas in 2012 for school. And then I decided that I wasn't going to leave because I enjoyed the small town feel. And in 2016, I realized I wanted to work with survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and sex trafficking. And so then in 2019, I found the Women's Center, and that's just kind of been it for me. I worked as an overnight weekend advocate at our shelter, and I moved into a counseling position. And then about 3 years ago, I moved into a program position, a program director. And then just in January, I'm in my new outreach and education because I realized that breaking those cycles, breaking those barriers is part of the key to change. And I want to be a part of that. So I love what we do, and I'm so passionate about it. And I'm so thankful for you and everything that you do in your community.
Likewise, I'm thankful for you. And it takes, we have to acknowledge, it takes a special person to be able to meet someone in their most, vulnerable time. One of the most, if not difficult times they may have ever faced in their lives. So yeah, your work is instrumental in creating change and just, providing hope, right? So thank you for the work you do as well. And, that's one of the reasons that this podcast is so important, just to raise awareness across the 11 counties and let people know that we're here to help. We're here to speak out and try to create change and raise awareness.
You said hope. People often ask, like, why do you do your job? And I'm sure you get the same questions. Isn't it hard? Isn't it difficult? Yeah, it is. But at the same time, there's so much hope in what we do. So much hope in watching a client walk through the doors on day one, and then 3 years down the line, watching them come back in a completely different individual who's made completely different choices and change, and now they're in a safe environment and healthy relationships. And it really is so incredible to watch a survivor restructure their whole life and restory it, basically. It's a lot of hard work that they go through, and they're the ones choosing to make the change, and they're the ones choosing to end relationships and start new ones, and choosing to respond differently to situations, and making those scary decisions to step forward and say, I need help, or walk into the police department and file a report, or sit on the stand in the DA's office and testify to what atrocious things have happened to them. And so they are courageous and they are strong, and there's so much hope in what we do. And I think that's important for people to understand, is this line of work is so incredibly hopeful.
Absolutely. And it's, it could be from the outside looking in, like there is no hope, or hope is lost. And so I hope that, through our agencies and all of our counties, that we are being that agent of change, or that agent to provide hope, to let everyone in East Texas know that hope is there. There's a path towards hope for all survivors.
What are you kind of talking about hope? What are you hoping this podcast does in our communities, or brings to our community?
Well, I hope one of my hopes is that it normalizes the conversation. I hope that, we can provide education, resource, or even a platform or an avenue for people to reach out to ask questions, to learn how to have the conversation. Because if you go to a local restaurant or local group, you know, domestic violence or sexual violence, it's not a popular topic. You know, that's not just in discussion, like, you know, pop music or reality TV. It's just not
happy.
yeah, it's not a happy topic. And, you know, on top of that, it is difficult to talk about, and it can be difficult to talk about with those closest to us. And I think, you know, hopefully we can provoke conversation, inspire others to engage in conversation, give them tools and resources to have that conversation, make them aware of what's available to them, make them aware of, you know, all the dynamics of abuse, how to handle those situations, steps they can take individually to support family, friends, or, you know, even engage in the movement in their community in some sort of way. So yeah, I think that would be my hope for this podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to thank some of our sponsors, Judge Tim Bryant and Crispy Mudana, for sponsoring this podcast, to have the ability to have this conversation, and because without that, we wouldn't be here. And so we're very thankful for people who are committed to being a change in the community and taking a risk on us, spreading awareness. So
yeah,
thankful.
very, very, very thankful. And you know, as cliche as it is, it does take a community, right? It takes a village. And we couldn't do this work alone. Our agencies are just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
And so, you know, in your work, in this movement, like, what do you hope happens over the next year? What are some goals you have? You know, you just moved into a new position. So do you have any goals that you've lined out, or just, you know, for the movement overall?
Yeah, some of the things that, you know, outside of our client services, both you and I do is education and prevention stuff. And so one of my hopes is to build a prevention program where I get to go into schools and the juvenile detention centers, because no child should ever have to make the choice that some of these children make. And so if we can help prevent domestic violence and give them an opportunity to say, you know, this is happening in my own home, what can I do to change it or be different? Educating them. It gives them the opportunity to have resources. I want everybody I run into to know that there's a resource for survivors. I want people in the community to say, like, oh, that's happening to you, or that's happening to somebody you know, this is where you go. There's been too many people I've run into in the last 5 years that have said, you know, I wish I knew about this 20 years ago. Yeah, how come I didn't know about this sooner? Or I wish I would have known about this sooner. This happened to me and I didn't have anywhere to go, so I just had to endure it. And that should never have to be the option that somebody feels they have, is I have to stick it out because I don't have options. Because a survivor has options and there are choices. And part of what you and I do is educating, and this is part of what this podcast is for, is to educate on what the resources are and where to go if. I think it's important to understand that everybody knows somebody who has been affected by domestic violence, sexual assault, sex trafficking, even in East Texas. It's not just, you know, over here or over there. It's domestic violence and sexual assault, no boundaries. And I think people need to understand that, because it's easy to keep quiet and it's easy to keep a secret. And this stuff should not be kept quiet.
Absolutely. And so education and awareness are essential to change and normalizing the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if we can normalize the conversation, maybe we can help a child or a mother or a father understand that they are not alone. Because when we feel like we're alone and there's not hope in that change, a lot of decisions are not made that probably need to be made. if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me what, as a man in society, what do you hope that men understood about domestic violence and sexual assault?
I think so. One of the biggest things I want men to understand is that domestic violence isn't a women's issue.
Mm.
Um, I've been in the field for 18 years, and overwhelmingly, um, I work with women. I go to trainings with women. When I go do trainings or prevention education or whatever it is, the majority of my audience is women. So I want men to know that they have a stake in this, to become engaged in violence prevention work, and survivor-centered support benefits them. That, if men are survivors themselves, that there's not stigma attached to reaching out or seeking help. And that, we as men have the power to help make change and create change in this movement. You know, every every man I've known in my life has has had a good heart. I believe they had good intentions. There wasn't any really malice there. But if we can learn to be more self-aware, and learn to listen and want to empathize with others' experiences, and get out of this idea that there's only one way to be a man, which often includes seeing women as inferior, or having to control or dominate, or speaking out makes me somehow less of a man. All of these traditional norms of masculinity. Then I think that would be a huge step into creating a society that essentially becomes violence free.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that group that you have, the men's group. Where is it? What is it about? When is it? How do people join? I think that if we're going to try to change the narrative, this is an important part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've partnered with the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault to have a pilot project here in East Texas called Texas Men Speak. So we meet every Thursday at 6 p.m. in Tyler. And it's a group of guys who come together to discuss these challenges that men face, to have real conversations that are hard, that are difficult, that allow us to hold each other accountable, allow us to challenge each other because it's a safe space, but it also allows us to support each other, and kind of build a connection, a rapport around something that a lot of men, in my experience, have difficulty talking about, which is themselves, or the idea of masculinity in general.
I feel like that would be a really great way of having like a support system and an accountability system for men.
Absolutely.
It's a really cool thing that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, as we are coming to a conclusion on our first ever episode, thank y'all so much for your patience with us. And, as we learn to navigate this situation.
We have one more sponsor we need to shout out, Ubaldo Morez. He is also has committed to making this project be successful. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Is there anything you want to share?
Yeah, I think it's important for people to take away that this will be a bi-monthly, bi-weekly, twice a month podcast where we will be talking about things related to domestic violence, sexual assault, and trafficking. And so there might be hard topics. There might be uncomfortable topics, things that might trigger some folks. But part of this is we're committed to having those tough conversations. We are also going to be bringing in people in the community to help bring awareness to different parts of all of this, different organizations, different individuals who probably have more information than we would. So we are committed to being holistic and well-rounded in what we're talking about. And another thing that we probably need to share is if you or a loved one have experienced domestic violence, sexual assault or trafficking, or there are resources out there, us being two of them. The Women's Center hotline is 800-441-5555, and that is answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And
Our 24-hour hotline at the East Texas Crisis Center is 903-595-5591, and likewise, that's answered 24/7. And that's really important for folks to know that that's available.
so if you are a survivor or know a survivor, share that number.
Absolutely.
And thank you for joining us on our journey. We're excited, and we hope you are too.
Yeah, absolutely. We hope to see you.
In 2 weeks.
Thank you for listening to Barrier Breakers, Building Communities and Connecting the Dots.